Hi, and welcome to Known Through Connection. I'm your host, Jess Pellicott. We're here with episode 18, and we've got a special guest. My guest today is Julie Finley. She is a mom, an entrepreneur, and the founder of Revelation Coaching, where she works as a fitness coach and an NPC Bikini competitor who lives her faith out loud. She has walked through years of a difficult relationship, found her way out, and came out on the other side with clarity about who she is and why she is here. She is passionate about her health, her children, and the women who are still inside situations like the one she survived. Julie, welcome to Known Through Connection. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Jess. Happy to be here.
Julie, it is an honor to have you. Thank you for being willing to share your story. You and I had connected over social media. And like you said, we got to kind of feel like we sort of know each other in a weird way, just through our social media and what we share. And then meeting in person for the first time was great. I really enjoyed it.
It really was absolutely wonderful. It was great to sit down and speak with you. So,
Thank you. So Julie, a couple things stand out to me about you. You are very health forward, very fit, and obviously helping a lot of people. We started at the beginning of the session. You had a client yesterday that won their competition, so congratulations
thank you.
to your client and to you as the coach for that achievement yesterday. I'm sure that feels so great to be able to see the clients you're working with excel in what they're doing.
It's all you can hope for. It's the first client I've taken to stage under Revelation Coaching since God put on my heart to rebrand my business. So to come out with such a big win, taking the overall, really was just an affirmation for me in so many ways. And it was great to be able to do that with my client. It's been an incredible journey working with her. She's incredibly driven and determined, and it's really all you can hope for. It was a great day.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations. That was fun to see the stories, and that you posted online. It was fun to see what took place and just the excitement around that. Also know that you're also a very passionate mother, and that you are very passionate about your faith and your relationship with God, and that has stood out for me as I watch you from my vantage point. I see somebody, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I see somebody who currently is very strong, very decisive, very clear on who she is, still working through different things. And so there is a sensitive heart there to some degree. But I also see a fire at the same time. And I don't know if you feel that way, but that's how I see you.
In certain aspects. I mean, I feel very strong, very confident because I feel like for the first time in my life, God is truly leading the story and my faith is in Him. And
Mm.
because of what He's done in my life, I have that extreme faith that honestly, no matter what could go wrong, I'm still grounded in that strong foundation. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Hmm. I don't think that what you're describing comes from a life of ease. I think that comes from dealing with hard things and dealing with challenges and coming out on the other side. At least that's my experience based on other people I've talked to. And I see that in you. And you shared, I think it was about a week or so, a little bit of the reality that you were facing in one of your previous relationships, which was very traumatic to just see as a post. I'm sure it was very hard to live in. So thank you for being willing to share your story online through that post so that all of the rest of us can kind of realize how much what we're talking about today impacts the world around us. I was doing a little bit of research ahead of this episode, and I was watching a TED talk from a survivor, and she said, and this was 13 years ago, that 1 in 3 women have been affected by domestic violence and over 15 million kids. And I think one of the things that has gotten close to my heart over the last year is um, I've come in contact with at least 3 women, 2 of which are good friends of mine, who have been open about what they've gone through. One of which, definitely domestic violence, been to the hospital, had surgery, and so this topic is very um, important for me, and I want to be able to share your story, your perspective, and I think you have a lot of wisdom that I think would be helpful for others. So thank you for being willing to turn something that's been very hard into something that can help others who maybe are in difficult situations. Um, I don't want to go anywhere that you're not comfortable, but for whatever you're willing to share, would you be willing to share a little bit of that hard season that you went through?
Absolutely. Um, I'll be honest, when I posted that, I did not expect the traction that that post received. I just wanted to share my story in hopes of it reaching one person. For so many years, I sat inside a shell where I felt so alone. And, that affected every bit of who I was as a person, every choice I made. So many different aspects of my life were affected by that pure isolation that comes from being in situations like that. And so, having come up out of it and spending the last few years really diving into my faith and finding my wholeness in Christ, I felt like it was my duty, not only for myself, but for my girls too. I have two little girls that look up to me every day, and, the last thing I want is them choosing a love like I chose. And not that you necessarily choose it, but to be able to see the red flags early enough, because they are there. They were absolutely there for me, and I ignored them because I was searching and looking for things based on the lack and wholeness that I had in myself at the time. And so that's really where wanting to share my story has come from, not so much to put the focus on the abuse so much. I mean, yes, we need to put the word out there and let people know that this is happening, and how many different aspects there are to that, because for women who get into situations like this, it's not something that you notice right away. It starts with the
Mhm,
psychological and mental aspect well before the physical abuse ever becomes part of the game. So, those are the aspects where I feel like if I was in a different place, I probably would have responded differently. But
mhm,
because I didn't really know a lot about true healthy love, healthy boundaries, I wasn't looking at standards, morals, character, integrity. I was looking at how charming someone could be, all of these things
mhm,
that led to how we ended up where we ended up. And what I found was, thankfully, I mean, God put me in the gym first, where I started rebuilding my strength. It started giving me a clarity
mm,
I'd never had. You start to realize you're stronger than what you think you are, really, is what comes out of that. But then I also realized that there was still something missing. Everything I was doing on my own wasn't enough. I still felt empty, and I still was sitting in this with seemingly no way out until I found my
mm,
faith. And my faith is what really brought this all full circle, because I was shown a love that was unconditional. The love that Christ offers you is truly unconditional, and he will fill the void. He
mm.
will fill the emptiness. And I guess that was more the agenda when I posted that post, is not to focus on the abuse so much as I wanted to focus on the truth of Christ and what can come out of that, what he can do, and how he can overcome all things and turn it for good. Yeah.
Roughly how long were you, in that situation?
Just under 10 years is how long we were together. I was married for 7. I mean, a really long time of sitting
Mhm,
in the depths of despair, honestly, being convinced that things were my fault that were not my fault. I was carrying a weight that I was never expected to carry. And that's another thing I found through my faith was, we have a tendency to carry things that are not ours. And when Christ asks you to set those things down and you can set those things down, only then can you separate yourself from the actions of others. And again, that was just another thing that propelled me toward being able to climb up out of that and climb up out of it with the strength of mind and the wholeness in myself that I have.
I I feel a little conflicted not doing this podcast episode, but just thinking that the people that I would probably really love to have this episode reach may not ever hear it in the moment, and the reason I say that is, at least I'm aware through, like I said, some research, but then also my close friends as they'd kinda describe, especially one, the situation they were in, um, they were it was a slow progression of being isolated and losing connection with the rest of their family, with the rest of their friends. It was progressing to where their phone was being monitored and taken from them. there was this progression of isolation and losing connection. Was that part of your experience, or was that not part of your experience?
Absolutely. It wasn't obvious. It was it now is obvious looking back, but absolutely severed family connections, an intentional drive between friendships and the people that were closest to me, especially the people who could see what was going on. There was definitely intentional separation there, um, and a very good at manipulating, making you think that those people were in the wrong for coming to you and expressing their feelings toward you because they were just trying to drive that individual out of my life, is essentially how that isolation occurred. And then it went beyond just my friend groups and my family. Then I began to be isolated from his friend groups when I started reaching out for help. I saw very quickly that the people that he kept close were just enabling what he was doing, um, allowing him to run on the narrative that he was not doing anything wrong and that everything was my fault. And, when you're dealing with individuals like that, you have to also understand they operate from an entirely different reality than we do. He had
Mm,
genuinely convinced himself that every action was justified, genuinely convinced himself that the only reason he acted out of hand was because I acted out of hand, and put me in a position to feel doubt and confusion and question myself. And for a long time, I couldn't trust who I was and the decisions I was making in my relationship. When I
mm,
would stand up for myself, I always ended up feeling bad for it. I always ended up being backed into a corner. And so you almost get to a point where it's just like, okay, if I just stay quiet, I'll keep the peace. And as long as I keep the peace, it'll be all right.
mm,
And that is another reason that I'm sharing this right now, because silence is not the answer. I said this in my
mm,
post, silence does not buy your freedom. Um, and it also is not going to help anybody else crawl up out of that grave. We need to put this on a platform. We need to talk about it because it's incredibly common. I cannot believe the number of people that have reached out to me just since sharing my story and telling me that they
wow,
too are climbing out of situations like this and haven't gotten the will to speak on it yet. Or the fact that
wow,
they've been through situations like this in the past and they cut off the entire world and became incredibly bitter and callous because of it. Um,
mm,
so it's been inspiring to me to be able to talk with them through that, to be able to help them separate themselves from what they went through so that they don't have to shame themselves and blame themselves. Because when you sit in a situation like that and you end up on the other side of it, there is no doubt that you still hold the weight of, can I trust who I am? Can I
mm,
trust myself to make the right decisions and know when people stand in front of me to have the discernment to not end up in the same position?
mm,
There is a lot of self doubt that comes from that, a lot of lack in confidence that comes from that. And it's scary. You are led by fear every step of the way. But
mm,
that is also the control that the individuals on the other side of this instill intentionally. Because if they have that control over your mindset, I had when I first left this situation, because I left this situation once and ended up going back. I filed for divorce once and due to influence of others ended up going back into this before I called myself out. And I remember a professional I was working with at the time looking at me and going, "You cannot allow this individual to live rent free in your head." And that was the truest
mm,
thing I could have ever heard, because every thought, everything I did was, "Oh my gosh, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Am I making the wrong choice?" Because they're also very charming. So
mm,
especially when the physical altercations would occur, and even when the mental and emotional abuse was taking place, when I would notice inconsistencies in behavior and notice certain behavior patterns that were just out of the norm of things you would expect to see of someone who's actually loving and protecting and wants to be that security for you. um, One of the biggest things that I saw come out of that, they are so incredibly charming. When those things would occur, he would come right back in and just smother me with love. And so, buying things, overly affectionate, all of these things. And you're going, how can someone who is so awful to me in this moment be so good in this moment.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm weighing too much in this hand because everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect, right? So maybe I need to just forgive and move forward and something will change. And it becomes this vicious, toxic cycle. And before you know it, you're almost in a position, and you and I talked about this, where when I said I didn't even recognize
Mhm.
who I was, I almost became that
Mhm.
individual because I was so angry, so angry. When things would happen toward the end of our marriage, I would just lose my mind. And it was because you spend so long in an environment that will bleed onto you. The actions of the person
Mhm.
around you will absolutely bleed onto you. You know, they say you are the product of the 5 people you're around the most. And when you're
Mhm.
living next, laying beside somebody every night who is acting with zero integrity, zero character, constantly, and it wasn't just shaming me. I mean, if I had been honest about the conversations that were had, it was very obvious because this person couldn't speak highly of really anyone in their lives. There was always some negative aspect. Um, and so, those are the things that I look back now and realize, like, gosh, and you just think it's normal conversation. So when they bring up something negative about somebody, you're like, oh, dang, well, and then before you know it, you become that negativity. I mean, there's just so much
Mhm.
pessimism around it. And even when it came to like goals I wanted to accomplish, if I would say, hey, let's, put together a plan to reach this goal, say we wanted to go on a family vacation, there was always there's no way we're going to be able to make that happen. Well, if we put the footsteps forward and make the plan, well, absolutely, there's a way. But because
Sure.
of that level of pessimism, you fall into that. It's just nothing but negativity
Mhm.
around you all the time. And it's all in an attempt to just keep and hold that control.
I think, you're describing some things that and I speak from a distance on this topic, um, thankfully, but based on my research and I'm hearing you use these words, right? The person is charming, the person shows you affection, the person does things that seem like they care for you. And like you said, nobody's perfect, and people, all couples, in my mind, have levels of arguments, but not violence, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so what I hear is that the person who's kind of the perpetrator on the person who's the victim kind of rubs off, has you thinking, "Oh gosh, if you just loved them just right, then this will all be better." Is that
Yep.
kind of, am I interpreting that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you're someone who operates out of goodness of heart, you can never assume that the person who you choose to spend your life with is someone who operates out of an agenda, something to feed their betterment. And that's unfortunately what I realized at the end, was that this individual from the day we met did not have good intentions for me. Every move
Mm,
was a
mm,
move with an agenda to achieve something on the other side of that. And it was usually because of things that they were hiding. Unfortunately, that's what you find. Um, but for me, for my instance, I grew up in a pretty unhealthy situation. And so I saw a lot of forgiveness. I mean, my mom climbed out of an abusive relationship, but even the marriage she's in now, it took them a very long time to get rid of those toxic cycles because of what she had been in before. So to me as a
mm,
kid, that was all very normalized. And
mm,
so when I became an adult and I started experiencing those things and walking through those things, I thought too, like, okay, maybe if I just keep walking my walk, this individual will meet me on the other side and everything will be fine. And that's almost where that sense of like, okay, if I'm just quiet, if I just do my duty and just love, love, love and provide for my home in the way in which my heart has
mhm,
always wanted to, then it will all come with ease and eventually things will change. And
mm.
unfortunately, that is not what happens. It gets worse.
In your case, was there a moment or a series of moments where you began to recognize that, hey, something needs to change, something's not right?
Absolutely. I would say it happened well before I actually pulled the trigger. Um, My oldest daughter is 7, and honestly, it was shortly after, her birth that I really started realizing that things were not okay. I was dealing with postpartum, dealing with horrible mental and emotional abuse, still being physically abused. And I was really in the depths of despair on my bedroom floor one day, and I was contemplating what life would be like if I wasn't here. Maybe it would just be
Uh-huh.
easier that way. And, it's by the grace of God, I opened my Facebook and came across a meme that talked about the legacy you leave for your kids. And that took me back to my mother and the legacy that she left for me. And not that she left a bad one,
Hmm.
but because of what we battled when we were kids, I didn't want that for my daughters. So that was the first step. And then after my second daughter was born, 2 weeks into that, while I was holding her, he became physically abusive. And that is the first picture that you see on the post that I had shared. That first image that comes up was that incident of 2 weeks after she was born.
Mhm.
Um, and I
Wow.
think then was really when I decided something had to give. And that's when I actually chose to take a step out toward faith. It was about 6 months later that I decided to join a church. Because like I said, everything I was doing wasn't working. And I believed in God. I knew God existed. I grew up with a family that had faith. And so I knew that I just had to find another outlet. And so I mean, I wish I could say it happens in a day. It doesn't, because what God
Mhm.
showed me is it wasn't just the reckoning of what was happening in my marriage that needed to happen in order for that cycle to break. I had to figure out what in me, what strongholds on my heart were holding me in that position. And
Hmm.
again, like I said, like I wish I could say it ended in a day, but it didn't. It took me, 3 years fast forward, 4 years fast forward. My youngest is going to be 5 in September, and um I'm finally breaking the cycle because I'm finally to the clarity where I know for a fact this is not okay. And I would say
Mhm.
that definitely started a year ago. But the biggest thing for me is I saw the switch in the individual that I was with, and their agenda goes from trying to keep you comfortable, from then rolling over into I have all the control and I don't care what happens to you. And had gone through blatant hurt. And then this individual just looked me in the face and spoke to me like nothing occurred at all. And when I
Hmm.
asked why those things occurred, I was met with, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And that was the moment for me. That was the moment where I realized I was not dealing with someone who was a rational thinker in any way, shape, or form. That was the moment I realized that I absolutely had to get out, or this was going to be my life forever.
I can't imagine. I mean, you're breaking from what I hear, you're breaking generational trauma, right? Like it was
Absolutely.
modeled to some extent for you growing up, and so you didn't quite know fully what healthy looked like. You were in the situation where you were being convinced. I perceive you were part of the problem slash solution where you needed to act just right and then things will be better. To break free of that, I think is enormous. That's huge.
Um, I can't tell you how it feels. It's an incredible feeling. There's so many emotions that come with it because obviously you have to mourn the life you wanted, right? There's a lot of grief that comes with it. Um, there's a lot of hardship in that. But again, it goes back to my faith, that wholeness in Christ, and the fact that I was shown an unconditional love. I have been able to set in the last few months of officially being out of this and moving through with divorce and really just thank God for the seasons in which he did not leave me. Because a lot of people would leave situations like this going, why? Why God did this happen to me? And would blame their faith or not go to church,
Hmm.
back away from their faith. I've seen that. I've had friends reach out who have gone through incredible traumas and said, I won't even talk to God anymore because why would he put
Hmm.
me through all of this? And the thing is, I don't believe that God puts us through these things. I think that at the time when I met my husband, was living a very carefree life. I didn't have faith at the center of my life, and I didn't have that truth at the center of my life. And so I don't think for a second that this is the relationship that God chose for me. But what I can say is I do know for a fact that he sat with me through every moment until I was ready to go. Until those things were broken off of me and I could finally release them, he sat with me through every single moment. And that brings a lot of emotion with it too. I mean, because I'm so thankful because he's so incredibly faithful and he's taking this and he's turning it for so much good. So much good has come out of this. It is hard. It's not easy, especially when you're going through the middle of a divorce with someone like this. There's lots of
Mhm.
wrenches thrown in the fire. There's lots of attacks, there's false claims, there's things said about you that are not true, and it's very hard to not react to those things. It's very hard to not feed into that. Um, but I know that I have an advocate in the Father. I know that First John says that. And I know that he has shown me and allowed me to break free of the things that could have held me forever. And, because of that, again, like, I have to attribute all of this to his truth, to the freedom I found in Christ, because I wouldn't be standing here today. I would not be sitting here talking to you. I wouldn't have the voice that I have. I remember the first time I spoke up in a room, and was in a marriage class. It wasn't even necessarily I was not even out of my marriage yet, but he put me in a marriage class at my church, and I started just kind of speaking up, using my voice to talk about things, of things I'd learned through the course of working my way out of this situation, even though I was still in the middle of it. And my voice shook. I was terrified
Mm,
to speak. I was
mm.
terrified, to stand in the foundation of what I knew to be true. And now I don't carry that fear. And I think that's the greatest thing that comes from that is because he was leading my steps, because it wasn't me driving the vehicle. Um, I have that strength and confidence to speak on this now because I don't fear anything. I know with him by my side, all battles are already won, and I can lay down the things at his feet that he didn't ask me to carry, and the things that I do have to hold a reckoning for and do have to confront. He will walk me through every step.
Julie, was it? I hear the strength and I hear the courage and I hear the journey. Right? You talk about going to this first speaking engagement and being very shaky, and it's clear for me how much you've grown since then because you do not come across that way anymore. You come across very steady, very passionate. What I have to imagine, though, if you have a 10 years or so in a relationship, you have a family established, you have potentially future dreams in your mind, and now you're having to decide to go a different direction. And in an unsafe environment, I would have to imagine that that was very scary to start that path. Was that true or
It's
not? Was that
terrifying.
not your experience?
It's
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying. Um, because you're trusting and taking a leap into the unknown. Um, and I was one of those people where I lived in a county where everyone would say reach out to the WCA. I couldn't. They couldn't help me because of where I lived. There were so many different resources that I didn't have access to because of where I was at. There were so many different resources that I couldn't take advantage of because of my marital status. Um, so it's terrifying. You have no idea what every day is going to bring. There were days that
Mm,
I would sit on my floor and cry because I didn't know where our next dollar was gonna come from, how I was gonna feed my
mm,
kid. I had started my own business, but it wasn't really bringing fruit, and, not because I wasn't good at what I did, but I truly believed that God couldn't take me where he wanted to take me and what I was in, and that's why I
mm,
had to struggle for a little while through that. But what I will say is taking that step in obedience and stepping out of the marriage he didn't ask me to be in, he has provided every step of the way. Whether it was a new
mm,
client that came along, a new opportunity, someone who believed in me. I mean, that's how I ended up with my position to be able to one on one privately coach. Um, God placed someone in my path who we had a conversation, and she had such an incredible belief in my ability to produce that she opened her door to me and gave me an opportunity. And, again, I have to attribute it all to the grace of God, to his mercy, because
mm,
there's just no other explanation for it because I left with nothing. My husband was in control of absolutely everything. We've been blessed
mhm,
within the court system to have a judge who's very familiar with these situations, and so that has definitely weighed in our benefit. However, I'm still the primary caretaker of my kids. I've not received any help. We're still walking this walk and battling it out. But um again, like I said, like taking that leap and walking in trust and faith, extreme faith, faith like I've never had before. He just keeps opening doors, and those doors are allowing me to be able to put food on the table. They're allowing me to live in a house that is safe. We're starting anew and building a new foundation, and every day is kind of a toss up, but I'm not stressed out, I'm not overwhelmed, and I'm not living in fear anymore. It's eye-opening, and I know a lot now, and a lot of that comes with education too. I've studied psychology for a really long time. Like, there are a lot of different avenues that I've traveled down to gain the level of education and understanding that I have on how these people operate. But if you're somebody who hasn't done that, to you, it's just, like, unfathomable. How could
Mm.
somebody operate like that? And you don't always
Mhm.
ways. So you believe the things that they're telling you. Obviously I've been in the gym community for a long time. I'm a nationally qualified NPC competitor. And so the gym has
Mhm.
become a second home for me. And so the number one thing that my ex-husband, soon to be ex-husband, used was that the people in the gym were against me. And come to find out that wasn't the truth at all. When I shared my story on social media, the number of people, even from the gym, who reached out and apologized because they had no idea. They're
Mm.
like, "We're so sorry. We had no idea. How could we not have known?" And I just had to tell
Mm.
everybody, like, it's not your fault. I did a good job at protecting someone who was not protecting me. Um, because because it was embarrassing. Like, you don't want the world to know that's what you're walking
Right.
through. Um,
Right.
to be
Sure.
entirely honest, my marriage meant everything to me. When I said I do for life. And
Yep.
you never ever want people to think that you have the failing marriage because you're afraid of the judgment
Mhm.
that comes with that. There's so many different aspects of shame that come from that. And, you
Mm.
know, I think that was one of my biggest things is I didn't want anybody to know. I became a professional makeup artist trying to cover up bruises and all of the things that I possibly could so that people didn't ask questions. When they did, I used excuses like my daughter dropped my phone on my face or, like the most ridiculous things, but people believed them. They took
Mm.
my word for it. Now, can I say everybody believed that? Probably not, but a lot of people
Mm.
did. A lot of people truly took what I told them and just accepted that. Thought there's no reason for her to lie to me, so why would she not tell me if that was what she was walking through?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and like I said, the people who saw through it, the people who would call it out, the people who said, "I know you're being abused," are the very people I was isolated from. And even then, I think I even stopped having a social life because every time I would leave the house, it wasn't necessarily that he would tell me I couldn't leave the house. It wasn't that severe, but it was every time I would leave the house, I'd get a text message. Well, why are you going to be gone?
Mhm.
Why are you, just
Mhm.
accusations coming from out of nowhere, like little things that made me
Mhm.
feel bad for leaving. So I would just come back home. Um, and
Mhm.
then I just stopped doing all of those things. Now, granted, the fact I also, through the process of healing, removed myself from a lot of environments. Um, I stopped drinking. I stopped going out. I stopped doing all of these things because those were things that fueled the fire. When alcohol was involved, it was 1,000 times worse. And it would take days to come back from that. I mean, he would give me the silent treatment for days until he finally got out of that. Because if you understand the psychological effect of alcohol on the brain, it literally severs the connection for like good decision making, and then puts you in a
Mm.
depressive, anxiety ridden state. So you drive the victim state even longer. And that's what I would experience with him because individuals like this love to be the
Mm.
victim. So if something bad happens, then I was always met with silent treatment. And then it's your fault. It's you're being argumentative. And it was 1,000 times worse when alcohol was present. The abuse would happen.
Mm.
It would be so much more grave, and then days and on end of the silent treatment, the emotional manipulation, all of the things. And so I decided to remove myself from those environments because I knew that not only did I need to get myself right, but it made it 1,000 times worse for me in the situation that I was in. One of my best friends, she was an abuse survivor as well. And we met my first year of competition. And watching her walk changed my life. She's probably the number one reason honestly, outside of God, I am where I am.
Mm.
She left abuse. She did it standing tall and with absolutely nothing. She had a failing business at that time. And instead of letting that take her under, she slowly rebuilt her business. She started a new business to which she now owns her own real estate firm, came back and bought a commercial building that now houses her real estate offices and her salon, and has a
Wow.
phenomenal husband with God at the center of their marriage. And watching her
Yeah.
walk through that and come out the way that she has and being a true disciple of Christ. I mean, she doesn't force religion on you. She doesn't talk about it all the time, but if you're sitting in her chair at the salon and you open up to her, she's going to share the word with you, you know? And
Mm.
that's one thing I love about her. She's such a servant to the people and she's always bringing people closer to Jesus. And through that, she has built an entire empire for herself and not only for herself, but for her family, for her and her husband and
Mm.
their extended family. And it's just been incredible to watch. And that's one person that's truly inspired me, which inspires me to sit here and tell my
Mm.
story. Because it wasn't until she spoke
Mm.
out that I saw, okay, like I might have some things I need to address in my life. And otherwise, I probably would not have even started taking my first steps out or started opening up to the
Mm.
people around me about what was happening in my life.
Mhm. I think it's interesting what you described. I relate to the other friends that I have who've been survivors and some of the experience that they've had. And it's scary because I think we don't realize, or at least I didn't realize, how common the problem might be because of how high functioning the victims are in the situation.
Yep,
The victims were in white collar jobs, right? I mean, they're
yep.
taking care of families, high functioning like you. And it was just shocking to learn, like, oh my gosh, this has been going on for how long? And to realize that this person has been dealing with being in fight or flight for years and just had no idea. And looking back now, I see signs, right? I see
Yeah,
where I would message her and she wouldn't respond at all, and there'd be reasons,
yep.
why. Well, turns out, the perpetrator was controlling her phone and all those things.
And that's 100% how I did. You end up wearing all of the badges. In my situation, I was both parents. I mean, my husband was present, but he did not help me parent my children. I was the only disciplinarian,
Hmm.
along with keeping up with the house. Wearing, even though he had control over all the finances, I was still wearing that belt too because he
Hmm.
had control over everything and then would tell me it was my fault that we didn't have things. And I eventually got to a point where I was like, here I am, like trying to pour into an empty cup, but I don't even know what I'm supposed to be pouring into that. So I'm driving myself
Hmm.
endlessly to try to produce fruit. And I don't even know what the deficit is because you have
Hmm.
control over all of this, but yet it's my fault,
Hmm.
even though I can't even touch it. So you do become extremely high functioning because you don't have a choice. You are the kitchen table. Like you have to keep the ball, and you have kids who are dependent on you and people who are dependent on you. And if you don't take care of those things, they don't get done. My mom just told me the other day that, like, how upset she would get because I would not only be responsible for the inside of the house, but the outside of the house too. Where I say, like, when the abuse starts, you don't even realize it's happening. We would be in groups of friends and, I look back now and I realize that, like, anytime we would be having a conversation among the group and I would have some insight to something, I would comment on it or something of the nature, and he would always, almost like a one up, have to have better knowledge or tell me, "No, you don't know that," or, things like that.
Hmm.
And there was one evening even early in our relationship, I went outside and just kinda took a breather, more or less just kind of frustrated, but I didn't even realize what was happening, and his friend's wife came outside and looked at me and goes, "He's being really tough on you tonight. Are you okay?"
mm,
I was like,
mm,
I honestly didn't even realize it, but yeah, this is all the time, you know?
mm,
And that was before we even got married, you know?
mm,
It's wild how much your reality is distorted, how much things are changed, and how easily they can just revert the cycle and continue it. And again, it just comes from such control over your psyche, over every moment of your day. Like, I know there are women who live under much higher and greater levels of control than I did live. That control was definitely
mm.
there, financial aspect, like mentally, emotionally. Was he blocking me every time I went to step out of the house? No. Um, but there were nights, I didn't even realize that I woke up a couple times and he was standing over me going through my phone, but he would
Wow.
stop when I would wake up. And it wasn't until
Wow.
last year when I tried to reconcile that I woke up to that same thing and realized how long this had been happening. But
Mm,
that's just the guilt in that individual. When you understand projection and things like that, then again, being able to separate yourself from someone else's actions, it wasn't because of what I was doing that he didn't trust me. It was because of what he was doing that he didn't have trust for anybody.
mm,
Um,
mhm,
he kept me where he kept me because of the goodness of my heart, because I did provide for my family, because I showed up, because that's useful, but also understanding that these people are just users. They really do just use you for what you're worth, and that's why so many women are stripped of what they have, of who they are as people. It truly is somebody coming in and siphoning the life out of you because they don't have that life in
mm,
themselves. Um,
mm,
and it's really sad when you see women who have not fully understood that yet because there's a lot of self-blame and shame that comes from that. A lot of
mhm,
lack in self-confidence. And again, when you talk about like, the strength that I appear to have at this time, it goes
mhm,
back to being able to come to the conclusion that, separating myself from someone else's actions because I
mm,
didn't do anything to influence that. I didn't make him make the choices that he made. He made those choices on his own. And so that gives me a
mm,
little peace. And then again, my faith.
mm.
Understand God's love for his people and that it's unconditional and everlasting, and he literally takes everything, the worst things that you could walk through and turns it for good.
Julie, I remember you said earlier that part of your journey was changing your environment. And I think I also heard you say that at least in your journey, part of the start of things for you was going to the gym. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Absolutely. For me, it was natural when I had a push, and at that time, I didn't even realize, which now I attribute 100% to the Holy Spirit because I was in such a detrimental state of mind. But I had a push to get in the gym and just start training and didn't know what I was training for at that time. But I was an athlete when I was young, and so that was kind of a natural step for me. I'd never been really in the weightlifting realm. I was a track brat and I loved to run, but I got into the weightlifting realm and then I started discovering the science behind it. I really fell in love with it. I have always had a love for the applied sciences, and I really just started digging into how exercise rewires the brain. So the cool thing about our
Hmm,
brain is it is fully capable of making new neurological connections all throughout the course of your life if you're intentional about
hmm,
it. And so while I was coping at the time, I'll be honest with you, I had to have another outlet. I was looking for a healthy outlet. I had turned to a lot of other things in my life that were not healthy for me, but they weren't helping me be another
sure.
better parent. They weren't helping me be a better person. And so the gym became my healthy outlet. And then the science behind that became my drive to continue, to show up and intentionally work to rewire those connections. And then through faith, I found a greater understanding of that. But the gym has truly shown me in more ways than none what I'm capable of. There
Hmm,
is quote on the gym that I go to that says, "The iron never lies." You know, like, you can go
mm,
out in the rest of the world and everything
mhm,
might fool you or you can convince yourself, but the iron never lies. When you come in there, you either can or you can't push that. And so when you go in every week and you're progressively grabbing more weight off the ground and it just gets better and better and you start to see these changes occur, then you start to realize truly what you're capable of. And if I can come in here and do
mm,
this and push myself to these levels, then what can I do in the rest of my life?
mm,
And that has propelled me into so many different avenues that honestly, I still don't know what God's doing, but I'm here for it
mm,
and super excited about it because He's pushing me in places I would have never put myself. Um,
mm,
I often tell my clients and the people that I talk to now that we give ourselves what we believe we're capable of and what we believe we're worth. And when you're in the depths of despair like that, you don't really have a lot of self-worth, nor do you have a lot of self-belief. So when you put
mm,
yourself in realms where you're forcing yourself to push yourself beyond those limits, another one of my favorite quotes is you're only bound by the limitations you set. If you continuously
mm,
say, I can't, I can't, I can't, then you absolutely won't. But if you start going, you know what? Yes, I can, then you absolutely can. And you will
mm,
surprise yourself every day what you're capable of, and that's what the gym has done for me. I got into about 2 years of lifting, and naturally, as an athlete, I needed a drive. I needed something more. I knew I was going in, I was building these new connections, I was starting to see results, but what was I really chasing after? So that's when I got into
mhm,
competing and decided to hire my first coach. Um,
mm,
and I mean, the rest is history. I was gonna compete in one show. I just wanted to do one show. Can I do it? Because I was inspired by 2 other women that I saw in the gym, and, I saw their work in the daily process, and that's actually how I ended up getting to stage. I didn't go to a show and see the women on stage and fall in love with it. I really didn't know anything about bodybuilding beyond Arnold Schwarzenegger because everybody knows who he is. But I saw
mhm,
these women coming in and training every day. I saw the effort that they were putting into their goals every single day. I fell in love with that process. And through that, I decided, okay, I need something greater. I need a challenge and I need structure because I had lacked
mhm,
such an incredible amount of time. And so, through that structure and through that drive and through that challenge, I competed in my first show and ended up winning all of my classes and qualifying for nationals at that very
wow.
first show. And when I did that, then it's like, okay, you can't stop now. So we kept going. I went to my first nationals in 2023, which was an incredibly humbling experience because after my first show, so jealousy was a big part of my marriage. 2 weeks before my first
Mm,
show, my husband blackened my eyes. I spent 2 weeks with
wow,
cream and makeup trying to make sure that I was stage ready, and they were pretty severe.
wow,
So it was quite a challenge. And I will say that high that I was on that first show kind of hit a low. Um, he did not give me an "I'm proud of you." There was no nothing, and then 2 months later, I competed in my second show, and his brother had competed with me and got a whole on Facebook, "Congratulations," everything, and still nothing. And I mean, this was 8 months post the birth of my last daughter that I competed. So, like,
wow,
I'm proud of you. Look at your accomplishment. Look at what you did. You would expect that
right,
from somebody who loves you and wants to see you grow and do big things. Um, and so not having that, I didn't realize how quickly I started chasing something that was not the origination of why I started this journey. Very
mm,
quickly, I was chasing the wrong things and I struggled. And you and I kind of talked about this when people get in there with the wrong mind,
mhm,
how post show can be
mhm,
so incredibly detrimental. And I went through that
yep,
hardcore. It was fine as long as I had the structure, but the second I didn't have the structure and a goal at the end of the table, I mean, it was all over the place. And I gained a lot of
mhm,
unnecessary weight. My mental fortitude wasn't there. There were a lot of things that I had to work through to get to where I am now. And, um, I'm again thankful because with my faith, I've been able to put God at the forefront and now kind of reset those steps and get back in it for the right reasons. And so that
mm,
is where revelation coaching comes in. And that, um, God placed revelation coaching on my heart when my health hit an all time low because years of stress on my body from being in the marriage that I was in, and then years of the stress of competing, I went septic and I ended up in the hospital for 8 days. And I
mm,
completely questioned what my future was going to be in competing. Am I doing the right thing for my kid? Because while I love to compete, I have to be here to show up for my kids. If I'm not, no one else is going to. So
uh-huh,
where am I actually supposed to be at? And most people would have taken that as time to just duck out and run.
mm,
And I sat in prayer and I spent a lot of time with God talking about, is this what you want for me? And really digging into my nervous system, understanding what triggered all of those things, and how nervous system drives your overall health. And
mm,
to me, because of my belief in God and my faith, I know that your nervous system cannot be at its highest level of health without having peace. And peace cannot be found without God. It truly
mm,
can. Prayer is so incredibly powerful and allows you to release so many things and opens up doors to so many blessings. And through his peace, my nervous system began to rest. And even now,
mm,
in such a highlight of life where we're at, I mean, very highs, very, very big highs, very big lows, lots of
mhm,
stress because of
mhm.
everything we're walking through right now. All of my labs have come back good, top notch. Like my
Wow.
body is in optimal health. But that's again going back to understanding that the nervous system drives everything. You can force the stress, you can
Mm,
force the expectation. I did it for years. But if you
mm,
don't have that underlying level of health, then your body will fall apart and eventually it will tell you. It will give you the stoplight and tell you it'll run out of gas. And that's exactly what happened to
mm,
me. And so
mm,
again, back to I went through what do I do with my business? What do I do with coaching? What do I do with competing? All of these things. And that's when God placed revelation on my heart because the
mm,
goal of my coaching company is not just to put people on stage, not just to teach people how to be strong, not just to show them what they're capable of, but the full circle wellness that comes with that, the wholeness that comes with that full
mm,
circle of wellness. Um,
mm,
and that starts with addressing the very underlying roots. So I'm thankful for that because he has placed people in front of me that, I have one client and I share her story often. When she came to me, if you saw her face, my heart dropped. She had no life in her. Um, and
mm,
her story is incredible. She told me about 4 months into our coaching relationship, she's like, I've never told you how and where I was the day before I met you." And she was about to take her own life. But
oh, wow.
through revelation
Wow.
coaching and being able God stewarding me to ask more questions, to push into people's lives and truly figure out the roots of what's driving their change, she's an entirely different person. The joy that
Mm,
overflows out of this woman is incredible. Um,
mm,
you know, and to see lives change like that, that's what it's about. It's about a total transformation. The book of Revelation calls us to decide if we want to be 1 foot in and 1 foot out or where we're actually going to
mm,
lead. And that's exactly what my coaching company is. It's a call to a total transformation. We're not here just for the outward picture and the show that you can put on social media because anybody can do that. But I want
mm,
somebody to have not only the physical goals and the emotional and the mental goals, but total wellness, total peace, total happiness, because you can't pour from a half empty cup. When your cup is
mm,
overflowing, you can do so many things with that. And I see that through what God has done in my life. And I just want everyone to be able to experience that. anyone and
Hmm.
everything who can experience that wholeness and that truth that comes from that. Um,
Hmm.
and yesterday's win is just an affirmation that we're in the right spot. Honestly, it
Yeah,
brings
that's
a full
awesome.
circle. Um, one of the greatest moments, honestly, I don't know if there could be anything to top that moment,
Hmm.
because that was the moment that I really sat down and went, "Okay." We not only answered the call, but through true and total transformation, we accomplished everything we set out to, and no piece was left uncovered. And so
Hmm.
many people will walk through life leaving pieces tucked away, leaving things tucked
Hmm.
away that will pull on them forever. And so my goal is to allow people to see that they can release the things that aren't meant for them and step into new and better
Hmm.
things. And I only hope to be able to grow upon that. I only hope that God will continue to use me. I say it all the time. I have no idea what he's doing. I have no idea where he's sending me, but I only hope that I can do it with his
Mhm.
name and his truth at the forefront and to change as many lives as possible.
Julie, thinking about impacting people that you probably don't even know, right? Thinking about the situation you were in, thinking about all that you've learned. If you could talk to women who are still inside a situation like yours that you were in, what would you want to say to them? What would you want them to know?
It's not your fault, first and foremost. I spent years blaming myself. It's not your fault. So many of us stay in it because we feel like it's our fault. Like if we would have done something differently, it wouldn't have ended up that bad. Um, and that you have a voice and your voice matters. Um, those are probably the top 2 most important things because once you realize it's not your fault and that you do have a voice that you can use, um, I think that's when the switch happens and you're a little more willing to look into your options and taking a step out of it. Those are
Hmm.
the top 2 things because so many times we're silenced and made to believe that it's of our own faults that this is occurring. And, you don't deserve it. There are so many people out here willing to help you that want to help you. Even though the isolation has occurred, please know that it's not normal. Um, and that everyone isn't against you. That when you start asking for help, you'll be surprised how many people are willing to pick up and come get you and to
Hmm.
help you stand on your own. When everything hit the fan last year, I was in the middle of a 21-day fast. I was asking God to reveal my marriage to me and to show me my people because I had no idea at that time. I knew my marriage wasn't good, but I needed to see something to finalize that it was the right decision to leave. Um,
Hmm.
and I also needed to know who was going to be there to support me because even my own family at this time had accepted the fact that I was living in this. I remember
Hmm.
leaving and my dad going, "We've known the whole time, but we knew you had to make the choice."
Hmm.
Um, and my mom was aware. She hated it, but she knew I was gonna stay in it as long as I wanted to. Um,
Hmm.
and so that was one of the things that I asked, like, "Please show me my people." And he did that. He did just that in a 24-hour period. My everything blew up. My husband had gone and stayed in a hotel room with another woman. That was
Hmm.
revealed to
Wow.
me, and he came home the next morning while I was out looking for him and looked me straight in the face and told me he'd been there all night long, like I wasn't up every
Wow.
hour wondering where he was. Um, and then also, uh, I had friends step up in unimaginable ways, in ways I never expected. I saw support in ways I never expected. Now, again, I did end up kind of reverting back, due to some spiritual advice that I had taken at that time and started to kind of doubt whether or not I was offering enough forgiveness. And this is something too that I think is really important to consider because this happens a lot as well. Forgiveness is
Hmm.
not for them. Forgiveness is for you to be able to find your own peace. Forgiveness does not mean you don't set boundaries. Jesus set boundaries too. He knew when to walk away. And so I think that's important too for people who do believe to understand that it's okay to walk away from your marriage. This is not what
mm,
God wants for a child of his. I feel like that's a lot of reason that believers stay in relationships like this, because they can be misled in that very aspect. Um,
mm,
but thankfully, again, all of that was shown to me through this last year
mm.
of trying to reconcile and that isolation that came from the poor spiritual communication. Um, he really did show me exactly what I was moving through and that it was okay. It was okay for me to
mm.
leave because he had much greater plans for me. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, going back to your question, Jess, that's exactly what I would say. You're not alone. You have a voice. It matters. Don't be afraid. It's not your fault. And forgiveness is for you to be able to find your peace.
Mm. Julie, what would you kind of one of my last questions here, what would you say to a woman who's not sure whether, what she's experiencing is abuse or not? What would you say?
Trust your gut. If you question it
Mm,
at all, it's abuse.
mm,
9 times out of 10, actually not even 10 times out of 10, when I see women question and I again, I ever since I left my marriage, I see this all the time now. Um, I'm on a couple platforms on social media, and I'm constantly seeing women ask these questions. And if
mm,
you feel insecure in any way, shape, or form, trust your gut.
mm.
I'm a firm believer in that intuition is the Holy Spirit leading you, is your spirit leading you because it knows something is not right, and you should believe that.
Thank you, Julie. I want to ask one more question and kind of in closing, but I do want to say that this was a very, in my opinion, very serious topic. There's a lot of people who are affected. There's a lot of danger. I know like I said before, I've had friends sent to the hospital because of the abuse that they've had to deal with. And obviously what you shared was very serious as well. So I feel compelled to add in here, if you're in immediate danger, call 911. In the United States, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-800-799-SAFE, or by texting START to 88788. Um, but Julie, I want to thank you so much for you being willing to share your story, your heart, what you've been through, the learning you've been through, both in terms of your relationship with God, the relationship with others, what healthy relationships look like, healthy connection. If others want to connect with you, how can others best connect with you?
I mean, I'm on social media. J.Finleyfit on Instagram, Julie Finley on Facebook, but also through Revelation Coaching. I'm on both of those platforms, or you can go to revelationcoachingomaha.com. And there's a contact form there. You don't even have to consult about coaching in itself. If you wanted to reach me through there, it's a direct email to me. So you could easily just go there and send me an email. Those are going to be the best ways to reach out to me. But um, yeah,
Well, Julie, is there anything you would like to say in closing? I want to give you space to just kind of say anything you would like to say in closing.
I there's been so much to this, but I guess the best way that I want to end this is just in letting people know and anyone who's walking through this know that there's hope on the other side. That in the moments where you feel hopeless, there's so much good that comes from removing yourself from a situation like this. That while it seems scary, there's nothing scarier than staying in it, and knowing that that's the rest of your life. I had to come to that revelation. I'm 37 years old, and I really had to sit down and go, is this going to be the next 40 years of my life? How can I accept this for the next 40 years of my life? You don't have to. You can choose to be on the other side
Mm,
of that. And there is so much hope and so many greater things. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for hope and a greater future, not to hurt or harm you. So know that if someone's
mm,
hurting you and harming you, that's not God's wish for you. He has much, much greater plans on the other side. So just to hold on to that, and to keep moving.
mhm. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for trusting Known Through Connection with your story and for being willing to say out loud what so many people are carrying quietly. And I've learned that is a lot of people. What you shared is not just your story, it belongs to anyone who's ever needed to hear that. And it was not their fault, and that there's a way through. And to everyone listening, I want to say this directly. Connection is not a luxury in a situation like what Julie described. It is a lifeline. The isolation that comes with abuse is not an accident. It is part of how it works, which means that one conversation, one person who reaches out, one moment where someone feels less alone can change everything. If you know someone who might be in a situation like this, stay close to them. If you are in one yourself, please reach out. You do not have to have it all figured out to take one step towards someone who is safe. Julie has shown us today what it looks like to come through something hard and turn that into something that serves other people. That is presence over performance. That is what Known Connection is built for. Thank you, Julie, for being here. Thank you, Known Through Connection community, for listening, and stay connected to each other. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jess.